Hey, it's Ollie. Now, it would sound a little bit flippant if I said that stopping caring about the language that you're learning may hold the key to making progress in that language. It would sound pretty flippant indeed. And yet, that is exactly what happened to me recently when I was in Hong Kong. I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about what happened, why it happened, and also what you can draw from that for your own learning, especially relevant for you if you feel like you're in a bit of a rut at the moment or you've hit some kind of plateau in your learning. Now, I told you in a previous video about how I went to get my hair cut in Hong Kong and I had to talk to my hairdresser Penny for like 2 hours in Cantonese and how it was a fantastic experience. But what I didn't tell you was that just before that, I had been in Japan for a few weeks and I had been studying Japanese pretty full on whilst I was there. Well, full on for me, which is not that intensive, but my brain was kind of very much in Japanese mode at that point. Right? After I got back to Hong Kong, my brain stayed in. To be honest, my brain is still in Japanese mode right now. And this was a few days after I'd got back from Japan. I was in Hong Kong, and I had just my Cantonese was just like nowhere. It wasn't on my radar. I was just thinking in Japanese. I was watching films in Japanese. I was reading in Japanese. Cantonese was totally off the scale for me. So when I went to get my hair cut, I kind of went in there thinking, okay, yeah, I'm probably going to have to speak, but whatever, doesn't matter. I was not prepared, really, mentally, to go in there and chat Cantonese to Penny for a couple of hours. Which turned out to be an incredible blessing in disguise. Because normally what happens is when I go to these kind of things, if I know that I'm going to have to go and get my hair cut and chat for a couple of hours, I'm going to be very focused on my language. I'm going to be thinking, how am I speaking? Have I improved? Am I communicating? I've got this self-monitor going on. I'm actively monitoring my own language, which has lots of benefits, but it can also be very destructive because what you don't reach is this kind of state of flow where you don't care if you make mistakes or anything like that, but you can just kind of speak freely. Like you just had a couple of glasses of wine or something, and you just, the conversation's just flowing. Very difficult to do that when you are actively monitoring your own language. Now, in this case, I managed to achieve that by virtue of not caring, which is it's weird. Even for me, it's weird. I went in there really not caring about speaking Cantonese, and as a result, I stopped caring whether I was making mistakes. I stopped paying attention to what I was saying, and as a result, I had the most enjoyable conversation in Cantonese ever. I walked out of there and thought, man, that is the most fun I've ever had speaking Cantonese. We had an awesome conversation. We talked about all kinds of things, from like his family to his trips to Thailand, to like the differences between people's hair, like Westerners' hair and Asian, all these things. It was a great conversation. And I came out and I thought, why is it not like that always? And then I went on Twitter and I kind of tweeted this out and I said, I just articulated this experience and thought, why is it that after 3 weeks of not speaking any Cantonese and not even thinking about Cantonese, I then go back and have a conversation and suddenly it flows better than it ever has before. And quite a few people replied, noticing the same thing. Steve Kaufman replied and said he called it the benign neglect effect, which I thought was quite nice. A bit of a mouthful, the benign neglect effect. And the idea here is that by actually just kind of letting your language studies fall by the wayside, which he's calling the benign neglect, by letting it fall by the wayside, what you're doing is you're allowing your brain to go into some kind of rest mode. You're removing the pressure from your brain to perform, to put into action all the stuff that you've been learning, to apply everything that you've been studying in the language. You're giving it a break, a well-earned break and a bit of a rest. And what we know about the brain is that when it is resting, it actually continues to process all the information that you've been giving it. Okay. Now, Barbara Oakley calls this the diffuse mode and the focus mode of study. So the focus mode would be when you're actively engaged in study. So you're sitting at your desk and you're trying to learn. And the diffuse mode is then when you go off and take a break and think about something else. When you're in the focus mode, your brain is actively working on learning things, making sense of things, And in the diffuse mode, it is simply chilling out and doing something different. But both parts are necessary. And it's been shown that the most effective students of all things, not just languages, but of anything, people who are effective at learning, they learn how to manipulate and control these two different modes. To oversimplify it, we'd be talking about something like the Pomodoro technique, when you're studying for 25 minutes and then taking a 5-minute break, or whatever it is you like to do. Studying for 20 minutes and taking a 10-minute break. Or my own personal preference, which is studying for 90 minutes, a bit longer than the Pomodoro recommendation, but studying for 90 minutes and then taking a half-hour break or a 20-minute break, and then another 90 minutes. I prefer kind of longer stretches, personally. People who are very effective at learning know how to control these, and they plan for these different modes, the focus mode and the diffuse mode. And this can work on a short scale and a large scale as well. So in my case, what happened was I'd been studying Cantonese for quite a few months, and then I took a few weeks off and did nothing. In fact, it was the opposite of nothing. I went and studied another language. And the effect of that was I kind of came back, and my speaking ability was like double what it was before. Or at least that's what it felt like, right? That's kind of on a macro scale. But on a micro scale, you can do this as well. You can implement this same thing. So what you can do is, if you tend to study for 2 hours in the morning, for example, and you're getting a bit tired of it, well, what would happen if you studied for 30 minutes and then took a 15-minute break, and then studied for 30 minutes and took a 15-minute break? How much more efficient could you make your study? What kind of improvements could you get in your ability to retain and process information if you actively structure in breaks to your morning, or to your day, or even to your week? If you study every day during the week, could you take a couple of days off? If you've been studying for months non-stop, what happens if you just take a month off? What's the worst that can happen? In fact, I'd probably rephrase that and say, what are the potential upsides, the potential benefits? And if you're someone that doesn't like to chill out, if you're someone that doesn't like to take breaks, then taking a break of this kind could be an incredibly powerful thing to do. So at the beginning of this, I kind of phrased it as not caring. And it's a bit disingenuous, really, because it wasn't the fact that I didn't care that produced this result for me. It was the fact that I didn't care that kind of led me to just disengage my brain from everything that I'd been doing previously. And that created the opportunity for my brain to rest, and then eventually culminated in this more adept than usual usage of the language on my part. That's the way that I see it. Steve calls it the benign neglect effect, which I quite like. Barb Oakley calls it the focus and diffuse, but there's lots of different ways to think about this. But how could you apply this in your study? Do you factor it in? What would happen if you did start to factor it in? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think this is pretty powerful. It's a bit nebulous. It's difficult to pin down, but there is a lot of potential for improvement in your study routines there. So leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Please subscribe to the channel if you would like more videos like this, and I'll see you back in the next video.